Good evening, friend. This is the Night Watch. I'm Frank. I have the watch tonight. You don't have to. Every episode is one true night from history, told slow enough to fall asleep to. So pull up your covers, turn off your light, close your eyes, and let the story drift you off. Tonight, the 6 nights Rome burned, and the city that stood back up out of the ash. It's an hour before midnight on the 18th of July in the year 64. I'm standing on the flat roof of a watch station in the valley south of the Palatine Hill in Rome, the largest city there has ever been, and the whole million of it is asleep below me. I'll tell you now what kind of night this is, because you and I don't lie to each other at this hour. Tomorrow the record will say July the 19th, and it will say the fire began in the shops by the circus, and it will count 6 days and 7 nights of burning. That's where we're going, together, slowly, at walking pace, with a lantern. But here's and I'll prove the hold on to, into this story that prove it before dawn, and this city does not die this week. Rome is the hardest thing to kill human beings have ever built. It's down there right now. You're right now, 20 centuries later, full of sleepers. And the valley I'm standing over tonight is a grass park where people walk their dogs in the evening. Every stone in this story has an after, so you have my permission to drift off anywhere along the way. The watch stays lit either way. That's the arrangement. That's always been the arrangement. Come up on the roof. The tiles still hold the day's heat. Mind the bucket by the ladder. There's always a bucket. Let me show you the city while it's still whole, because nobody thought to describe it until it wasn't. Rome, at night, from a watch station roof, is mostly a sound and a smell. The sound is carts. Julius Caesar banned wheeled traffic by day 100 years back. So everything this city eats and burns and builds with moves in the dark. Grain wagons, timber drays, oil jars knocking together on the axle, iron rims on stone, all night, every night. Romans complain they can't sleep for the racket. They sleep anyway. A city teaches you that. The smell is smoke, and I want you to understand it the way a watchman does. 1 million people cook on charcoal and light their rooms with oil. There are always 1,000 small fires burning in Rome, every one of them somebody's supper or somebody's lamp, and the night air lies over the 7 hills like a warm gray blanket woven out of all of them. That smell isn't danger. That smell is the city breathing. A watchman's whole craft, friend, the entire trade, is telling the breathing from the other thing. Charcoal and lamp oil, that's sleep. Pitch, dry timber, scorched wool, rope, that's work. You learn the difference through the nose, in the dark, years before you ever need it. Tonight the blanket smells the way it always smells. Hold that. Whatever the record says about tomorrow, the 18th of July was an ordinary night. and ordinary is worth watching closely while it lasts. Now, who I am, since we'll be up all night together, I'm a watchman of the vigiles. The word just means the awake ones. There are 7,000 of us, give or take, in 7 cohorts, and every cohort holds 2 of the city's 14 regions. And what we are, friend, is the first fire brigade in the Western world worth the name. We exist because this city burns. It's always burned. Timber city, oil lamps, packed close. 58 years ago, it burned badly enough that the Emperor Augustus, who didn't spend money without wincing, put a tax on the sale of slaves and used it to buy the city a night watch. Paid men, organized, drilled, posted, awake. That's us. The wits of Rome call us the Spartioli, the little bucket fellows, because of the Esparto buckets we carry everywhere, and a nickname that mild, after 58 years, is practically a decoration. Most of the work isn't flame at all. We walk the lanes. We try locked doors. We shout at bakers who bank their ovens carelessly, because bakers, friend, are the recurring villains of the fire watch. We haul home drunks and pick up runaways, and 49 nights in 50, the log at the station reads like every watch log everywhere, all quiet, wind from the south, a cart loose on the hill. Remember the buckets, though. Everything Rome learned about fire before tonight fits in a bucket. What it learns this week won't. Step down into the station with me a moment. I want you to see the gear while it's still hanging clean on its pegs. Because there's a kind of prayer in equipment. Buckets. First. Always buckets. Stacked in nested towers by the door. Then the hooks. Long iron fire hooks for pulling burning thatch and rafters down before the flame can hand itself to the next roof. Axes beside them, a coil of rope, jars of vinegar, acetum, because soaked into a mat or a blanket it smothers better than water spreads thin. The mats themselves and the big cushions, and I'll tell you plainly what those are for. People jump from high floors, and we spread something soft, and as much of that as we spread something soft as either of us needs at this hour. And in the corner, the pride of the station, the siphon, a bronze pump, 2 cylinders, and a rocking beam. 4 men to work it, and it throws a standing jet of higher than water. Higher Sandria than Lavanders Andra invented it. Rome, bro. When the siphon crews drill in the yard, boys hang on the fence to watch, and the crews know it, and the arcs get taller. Last. Out back where you don't see it until you need it. The ballista. A siege engine, kept by firemen. Because the oldest truth in this trade is that you don't fight a big fire with water, friend. You fight it with space. You pull down the houses in its path and starve it. Rome knew that before tonight. Hold that too. Now come see the reason this valley has a watch station at all. Walk south with me. 10 minutes, no hurry, to the long dark shape lying between the Palatine and the Aventine, like a ship at anchor. The Circus Maximus, the greatest arena mankind has built, then or since. A racing track, 600 meters long, stands rising on arches, seats for 150,000 by the sober count, and old Pliny, who exaggerates the way other men breathe, swears 250,000. On race days, the roar out of this valley rattles cups on the Palatine. The emperors built their palaces overlooking it, which tells you the real order of things here. The palace watches the circus, not the other way round. Tonight it's empty. And an empty circus at night is one of the quietest places on earth. The way only huge things can be quiet. Starlight on the long spine of the track. The turning posts standing like sentries. Somewhere down the far end, a watchman of the arena staff doing his round. His lamp a little moving star under the arches. And under the stands, friend, wrapped around the whole outside of the building at street level, the part of the circus nobody sings about. The shops, arch after arch after arch, hundreds of them, rented out, shuttered for the night, packed to their ceilings with the goods of the city. Look at the shops. History is about to. What's in a circus shop at midnight in July? Cook stalls, first, dozens of them, because 250,000 race fans eat, and every stall has its jars of olive oil, its charcoal store, its banked embers sleeping under ash. Wine shops with pitch-lined jars and pitch for resealing them, rope sellers, awning makers, and an awning maker's stock is sailcloth and cord, floor to ceiling. Cloth merchants, timber and wicker in every wall and every shutter and every shelf, oil, pitch, rope, cloth, wood, and ember, arch after arch, under a wooden grandstand, in a week when it hasn't rained. I walk this row every night, and every night it's fine, because it was fine yesterday. And that, friend, is the arithmetic every disaster on earth runs on. Knock, and the shopkeepers answer. Lamps out. Coals banked. Coals same as always. Watchmen, and they're right. Almost every night of history, they're right. And the trade of the watch is to keep walking anyway, because almost is a word that eats cities. There's a wind tonight. That's the one thing I'd write in the log. A dry southeast wind that's been building since dusk, funneled down the valley between the hills, and it worries at the awnings and hums in the arches, patient as water. An old watchman of mine used to say the circus had stood 400 years and would stand through whatever the summer brings. He said it every July. I'll leave that line here on the roof of the night, friend, and we'll come back for it. One more picture. While the city's whole, the most Roman picture there is, the insula, the islands, the apartment blocks. Because here's what the postcard view never tells you about Rome. The marble city, the temples and forums, that's the city's face. The city's body is timber. 1 million people stacked in wooden apartment towers, 4 floors, 5, sometimes more, built on narrow frames over shops, leaning over lanes you can cross in 4 strides. The ground floor is respectable. The higher you climb, the cheaper the rent, the thinner the walls, the further from the water and the closer to the cooking fire, until under the roof tiles you find one room holding a family, a brazier, a lamp, and everything they own. The poets who lived up there left us their reviews. Juvenal, a generation on, says Rome is a city propped on slender poles, where the landlord papers over the crack and tells you to sleep easy while the building yawns. They joked about it the way people joke about the thing they can't change. Rent, friend, the oldest complaint in the world. Understand the lanes and you understand this whole week. A fire in open country walks. A fire in Rome's lanes climbs into the upper floors and then simply steps across the street, roof to roof, without ever touching the ground. The lanes aren't streets to a fire. They're kindling laid in rows. That's the city. A stone face, a timber body, a dry month, a rising wind, and everyone asleep. It's past midnight now, the 19th of July, by about an hour, and I'll tell you exactly how it announces itself, because it isn't a bell, and it isn't a shout. It's the nose. Charcoal and lamp oil. That's the city breathing. What reaches me on the roof now, on the wind, is the other thing. Pitch, first, sweet and sharp. Then rope and sailcloth, a dry, toasty wrongness. Then the one that stands a watchman up straight. Fresh timber smoke, green and resinous. The smell of structure. You look before you move. That's the discipline. South and east. Down the valley. And there it is. At the curved end of the circus where the shops crowd thickest. A glow. Not flame, not yet. From here, just a warmth in the air above the arches. An amber breath where no lamp that size should be. Pulsing a little as the wind works it. Every fire in history has a moment like this one, friend. A minute or two when it's still a neighborhood matter, a bucket matter, when 4 fast men and a siphon could write a different century. The men on post down there are moving. I can see their lamps converging, small and brave. The bell on our station starts, and the strokes are the fast pattern, the working pattern, and under it I can hear the wind, which has not slackened, sliding down the valley toward the glow like a customer. Time to go down, friend. Bring the calm with you. It's the one thing we carry that doesn't run out. Here's what the first hour looks like. From inside it, told the way I'd tell the log. The shops at the circus's east curve are alight. A dozen arches, then 20, and the wind is serving the flame like a bellows boy, lifting scraps of burning awning and laying them neat on the next roofs down the row. The bucket chains are formed and working, and the siphon crew has its jet standing on the nearest arch, and I want you to see clearly, because it matters for the nights ahead. The men are doing everything right. The drill is holding. Nobody's panicking. Rome's watch is fighting the way it trained. And it isn't enough, and the honest ones in the chain already know it. The fire has the 2 allies no drill can answer. Fuel laid in an unbroken line, arch after arch of oil and pitch and cloth, and a dry wind funneled straight down the row. It isn't burning the shops one by one, friend. It's reading them, left to right, like a sentence. The commander on the ground does the right thing, the old thing. He sends for hooks and starts pulling down stalls ahead of the flame, buying gaps, and the wind steps over every gap he buys. First watch of the night, and the log line I'd write is one nobody wants. Fire in the circus shops, wind southeast, spreading. The awake ones are awake, friend. Stay near the lantern. The valley's about to get loud, and we're going to keep our voices low all the same. Let me tell you how a city fire moves, friend. Because once you understand it, everything about the next 6 nights makes a terrible calm sense. And calm sense is what we deal in up here. Tacitus, the historian who'll write this down while the eyewitnesses are still alive to check him, puts it in one line. The fire broke out in the shops, ran the whole length of the circus in its first rush, and there was nothing in its way. No walled mansion to slow it, no temple precinct with stone shoulders. Just shop against shop against shop. The fuel laid continuous, as we saw it laid. So picture the valley from above, the way the gods and the Watchmen see it. A long trough between hills, floored with the biggest wooden building on earth, wrapped in a ribbon of oil and pitch, with a dry wind blowing straight down its axis. The fire doesn't wander. It's poured, like water finding a channel. By the time the first bucket chains are working the east curve, the west end of the same building is already tasting smoke on the wind, and the flame is moving at the pace of a man walking briskly. Which doesn't sound like much, friend, until you remember it never stops to rest, and we do. From the circus, it spills into the flat districts north and south, the level ground where the lanes run crooked and narrow, the old Rome, the timber Rome, and there it stops being a fire in a building and becomes weather. Now the work changes, and I want you to see what the watch actually does on a night like this, because it isn't heroic, and it's the most important thing anyone does all week. We stop fighting the fire. The commanders see the arithmetic early. Wind plus fuel equals a front no siphon reaches across. So the buckets pass to the rear, and the cohorts turn to the older trade, waking people up. You take a lane, you and 2 others. You start at one end and you beat on every door, every shutter, with the hook handle, both hands, and you shout the 2 words that need no explanation at this hour: fire, out. And you don't stop to argue, and you don't stop to help carry, because the lane behind you has 40 more doors, up the outside stairs, floor by floor. The city wakes in layers, friend, the way it sleeps. The shopkeeper on the ground floor first, then the families, then, last and highest and closest to the coming light, the ones under the tiles with the brazier and the lamp. What do people take? The record doesn't say, so I'll tell you. What watchmen always see. Every fire, every century, because people don't change. The child, first, always, on the shoulders. The strongbox or the tools of the trade. The old dog. The grandmother's gods off the shelf, wrapped in the good cloth. And at the door, that one look back, half a heartbeat, at everything staying behind. Then, the lane, and the river of neighbors, and away. The human river runs downhill, and away from the wind, the same physics as the fire, just slower and sadder and carrying more. It flows west and north through the night, toward the Tiber bridges, toward the open ground. And I'll tell you what the river sounds like. because it surprises people. It's quiet. A fire crowd in the first hours isn't a screaming crowd. That's for the stage. It's shuffling feet and coughing, and children asking the same question at intervals, and low voices answering it, and somewhere a man calling a name, patiently, over and over, like a bell buoy. And inside that river, friend, the city is quietly saving itself, person by person, and the record won't name a single one of them. So let's spend one breath on them tonight. The neighbor who goes back up for the lame cobbler on the 4th floor, the wine seller who stands at his door handing his stock out, cup by cup to men on the bucket lines, the woman who walks out of the smoke leading 11 children, 4 of them hers. Every disaster produces these people in numbers that shame the pessimists, and history keeps almost none of their names, and the watch remembers them anyway. That's partly what a watch is for. By the second night, there are tens of thousands camped along the river and in the vegetable gardens beyond the walls, watching the sky above their own districts turn the color of worked bronze, doing the arithmetic of everything they own. And still, the wind holds. On the hills, the great ones are learning the fire's one piece of good manners. It doesn't check the deed before it eats the house. The flame comes up out of the valley. On the second and third nights, the way heat always climbs and takes the lower slopes of the Palatine, and then more than the lower slopes. Understand what the Palatine is. The hill the emperors live on. The hill so synonymous with power that every palace in every language since is named after it. Augustus lived here in famous modesty. The ones after him, less so. 800 years of the best of everything, with the best view in Rome, which this week means the closest seat to the furnace. It burns like anything else. Roof beams are roof beams, friend, cedar or common fir, and the fire has no idea it's being historic. And here's a detail to file for later watches, because half of Rome will spend the next year arguing about what it means. Among the first great properties wrecked is the emperor's own. Nero has been building a long pleasure palace, the Domus Transitoria, the passageway house, threading from the Palatine across toward the gardens on the Esquiline. The fire walks through it like a guest who owns the place. Whatever else is true about this week, and we'll weigh it all fairly when the emperor enters the story, the flames treated his roof exactly like the cobbler's. Fire is the last honest thing in Rome this summer. Everything it says to everyone. Now I have to keep the log honestly, friend, and log the losses, because on the third night, the fire stops taking buildings and starts taking memory. I'll keep my voice where it always is. You keep your eyes closed. We'll do this part like Watchmen, name by name. No theater. At the foot of the Palatine stood the great altar, the Era Maxima, raised, the Romans said, by Evander the Arcadian, in the age before the city, where Hercules himself was honored for 800 years. Gone in an hour, stone cracking in the heat like river ice. Nearby, the temple of Jupiter, Stator, Jupiter the stayer, the stander of ground, vowed, the story goes, by Romulus himself in the city's first battle. At the moment the line held, every schoolboy in Rome knows that story. The building of it, gone. The Regia next, the little palace of King Numa, the second king, the gentle one, who gave Rome its priesthoods and its calendar. 7 centuries back. It was the oldest address in the forum's world, kept and rekept, patched and repatched, the way you keep a grandfather's chair. Gone. Tacitus will write the list with a historian's flat grief, and you can feel him pressing the pen down. The oldest things, the things no money rebuilds, because what made them wasn't marble, it was the 800 years. Rome measures itself by its relics the way you measure yourself by your memories. Tonight, the city is forgetting things it swore to remember forever. Breathe slow. The list has 2 more lines. The Shrine of Vesta. I'll go quiet a moment after this one, so let's say it properly. In the Forum, in a small round house, burned the one fire in Rome that was supposed to burn, the sacred hearth, tended by the 6 Vestal virgins, never allowed to go out, because, as long as Vesta's flame lived, Rome lived. It's the city's pilot light, friend, the hearth of the whole Roman family. And beside it were kept the Penates, the household gods of the Roman people, the little images every Roman home keeps by its own fire. Except these were the home gods of the state itself, older than the Republic, said to have come from Troy, in Aeneas's own arms. On the 3rd night, the house of the eternal flame burned down from the outside. The Vestals got out, and the sacred things that could be carried were carried. The record is thin, and we won't invent, but the shrine itself, the hearth of hearths, went into the general red. Think what that does to a Roman mind. Not the money loss. There's no money in it. It's the feeling you'd have watching your family photographs burn, multiplied by a city, multiplied by 8 centuries. The one fire that mattered, drowned in fire that didn't. And the Temple of Luna, the moon's own house on the Aventine, built by a king when Rome still had kings, also gone. The moon's temple, lost at night. That's the list. That's enough of the list. Stay with me. The wind can't blow forever. One more kind of loss, the quietest kind, and the one that touches this watch personally, the books. Tacitus names them in the same breath as the temples, the treasures of Greek art brought home over centuries, and then, in his words, the ancient and genuine monuments of men of genius. He means manuscripts, friend, records, speeches, Histories, poems, the paper memory of the city, in private libraries and public archives across the burned districts, curling into red lace a shelf at a time. Things written by hands, 700 years still, read by nobody again, ever. I'll tell you why this one sits crooked with me. On another wall, east of here, I told you, paper wins. That the books get out. That they always get out. That a city can fall, and its library can still conquer the future. That was true there. It'll be true again and again. Not this week. This week, the fire is faster than the copyists, and paper loses, and there's no sweetening it, and I won't try. Some nights, the watch logs a defeat, but log the whole truth. Rome's memory doesn't die of this, because Rome's memory was never in one place. Copies live in Athens, in Alexandria, in 1,000 villas outside the walls. Tacitus himself will sit down 60 years from tonight in a rebuilt city and write this very week so well that here we are, you and I, 20 centuries later, keeping his account by lamplight. The books lost a battle, friend. Hold the war for a later watch. All this time, in the smoke below us, the Spartioli are still working, and I want to log what their fight actually looks like by the third night, because it's the most honorable kind of fight there is, the kind you're losing. The buckets are done. You don't bucket weather. The work now is space. The cohorts and the soldiers pull down houses ahead of the front with hooks and ropes and the ballistae, throwing gaps of bare ground in the fire's path. And the method is right, friend. Remember, it's right. It will win this fight yet. It just keeps losing tonight, because the wind is a gambler with house odds. It lofts burning thatch over every gap they clear and lights the far side while the near side's still falling. So they fall back and clear again, and fall back and clear again. Night into day into night, faces glazed, eyebrows gone, voices burned, down to gestures. Men sleep an hour in a doorway with the hook still in their fist. Somebody's wife arrives at a barricade with bread and a tone that will not be argued with, and feeds a whole cohort by force. And the mats and cushions do their work in the high lanes, and I'll leave that sentence exactly that length. Nobody is winning, but between the fire and the river of the saved stands one thin line of exhausted men with buckets on their belts, and every hour they buy, more of the river gets across. Buying hours, friend. Most of what the brave ever get to buy. Here's the strangest true thing about a week like this, and then we'll rest a moment before the emperor enters. The city keeps sleeping. Not everyone, but walk the safe districts on the third night. The 4 regions the fire never touches, out past the wind's reach, and you'll find windows dark, and stalls set for tomorrow's market, and a man snoring behind his shop door, with his family and his neighbor's family on the floor beside him. Down on the campus and along the river, tens of thousands lie in rows under the open sky. On cloaks, on straw, children packed between grandparents, and past midnight. Most of them, friend, are asleep. People think catastrophe cancels sleep. It's the opposite. Catastrophe is exhausting, and the body collects its debts on schedule. Grief sleeps. Fear sleeps. Eventually. On the city's worst week, the human need you're indulging right now stayed exactly as strong as it is on the softest peacetime night. And I find that steadying, and you're allowed to find it steadying too. The glow stands over the middle districts like a false dawn that won't finish rising. The river still says what rivers say. And 30 miles down the coast, at a seaside town called Antium, where the emperor of the world is enjoying the summer, a rider comes up the last mile of road with the smell of Rome on his cloak. Third watch cry, friend. Fire in the city, wind holding, the road south awake. Let it carry you. The story goes to meet the emperor. You don't have to. Thirty-some miles south of the smoke, on a curve of pale beach, sits Antium, and in Antium sits the emperor. And before we watch him hear the news, let's be fair and meet the man, because this week will follow his name forever, and a watchman owes even emperors an honest ledger. Nero is 26 years old. He was born in that seaside town, and he's ruled the world since 17, which is an age at which nobody should rule a kitchen. 10 years on the throne now. The empire he holds runs from the rains of Britain to the cataracts of the Nile, at peace, mostly, and fed, mostly, which by the brutal accounting of empires counts as success. And what the young master of that empire wants the way other men want gold or conquest, is to be an artist. He sings, he composes, he races chariots, he performs, with a trained voice and real practice. And Rome's old families find this more scandalous than cruelty. Friend, an emperor on a stage, a Caesar taking applause like a hired Greek. The city has been split for years between the classes who adore him, the crowds, the race fans, the theater seats, and the classes who wince at him, the Senate, the old names, the men who write histories. Keep both Romes in mind tonight, because when the fire's ash settles, each of those Romes will tell the story of this week its own way, and we have inherited both versions, and between them, the truth walks quietly, the way we do. The news comes up the coast road, the way bad news always travels, friend. Faster than the official messenger, slower than the smell. By the second day, the southern horizon behind Antium's hills wears a stain that everyone pretends is haze until nobody can pretend And then the riders start arriving, hours apart, each with a worse map. The circus gone, the valley gone, the flats alight, the Palatine catching. Now, the record. Tacitus, no friend of this emperor, writes one dry line that has been read two ways for 20 centuries. Nero was at Antium and did not return to the city until the fire approached his house. His house, the long passageway palace we watched burn a watch ago. Read it cold, it's damning. He came back for his property, not his people. Read it practical, it's just how information works. Each messenger says the fire is somewhere new. Nobody in Antium can see the whole board, and the report that finally says, your palace is alight, is the report that says this is not an ordinary fire, this is the one you ride for. I wasn't on that beach, friend, and neither was Tacitus. The watch logs what's known. What's known? He was away when it started, 30 miles of coast away, and when the true size of it reached him, he came. Whatever else gets argued tonight, the road north had an emperor on it riding toward the burning, while half his court, I promise you, advised the opposite. Picture the ride, because it earns a minute of our slow pace. The coast road first, sea on the left, dark farms on the right, and ahead, all night, that glow standing on the horizon where the city should be, doing its slow false sunrise. Every mile it widens. By the last hills it fills a quarter of the sky, and the smoke column leans away on the wind like a mountain that learned to bow, and the horses smell it and have opinions. Then, the strangest part, the traffic. The road into Rome runs against a road out of Rome, and the road out is full. Carts, hand barrows, families walking. The river of the saved we watched form 2 nights ago, now stretched 20 miles long, and the emperor of the world rides upstream through it in the dark, past every single thing his capital owns that could be carried. What did they shout at him? The ones who recognized the profile under the road dust. The record is silent, so the watch stays silent too. But hold the picture, because Rome will spend the next year deciding what it thinks of this man. And here at the third night's end, he is doing, at minimum, the one thing that can't be faked afterward. Arriving. Toward it. Not away. The gates, when he reaches them, are working like a bailed boat. Everything flowing one direction, and one rider and his escort pressing the other way, into the orange. And now, friend, I get to log the part of this story almost nobody knows, because the legend ate it, what the emperor actually did. He opened everything. That's the short version, and it's Tacitus's version, a hostile witness writing checkable facts. The Campus Martius, first. The great open field in the river's bend, north and west of the burning. Parade ground, meeting ground, the city's spare room, open to the homeless. Then Agrippa's monuments on that field, the public baths, the porticos, the halls, the Pantheon's own precinct, the grandest covered spaces in Rome that weren't temples, opened, sleep in them. And then his own imperial gardens across the river. The private paradise on the Vatican side, lawns and colonnades where an emperor walks alone. Opened. Cook fires on the lawns. Laundry on the statues, likely as not. Understand what you're looking at, friend, because it's the birth of something. Grain doles Rome knew. Bread was policy here long before tonight. But this, the state catching the roofless in real time, requisitioning shelter, running the response from the top. The world had not seen much of that before. Call it the first disaster relief operation of its size in the West. Run out of the pocket of the man half of history says lit the match. Both. Facts, side by side on the same page of the log. That's the trade tonight. The watch reports. The verdict can sleep. Shelter, then food. Because a burned-out family is hungry twice a day with everything else gone wrong. The record. Temporary structures raised for the destitute multitude, Tacitus's words, barracks and sheds going up on the campus while the fire still worked the far districts. And grain, ordered up from Ostia at the river's mouth and from the towns around, moved on the water because the wagons can't cope. The emperor's own supply system turned around and pointed at the emergency like a siphon at a burning arch. And then the detail I love, friend, because policy is where a state's soul shows. The price of grain was cut to 3 sesterces, the modius. A modius is a measure about the size of a big loaf's worth of flour, and then some. 3 sesterces is roughly what a laborer earns before his morning break. Cheap bread, by decree, in a burning city. Why does a watchman dwell on the price of flour? Because panic is a fire too. A burned city that stays fed stays a city. A burned city that goes hungry becomes something else within a week. Something with knives. And every commander of every disaster since has known which decision mattered most in the first 5 days. Bread at 3 sesterces is the reason this catastrophe stays a catastrophe and never becomes a collapse. The camps eat, the children sleep in Agrippa's marble halls. It is, by every checkable measure, working, which makes what happens to this man's name almost interesting enough to keep you awake. Almost. Because now, the rumor. You've been waiting for it. 20 centuries have been waiting for it. Let's take it out, look at it honestly, and put it down gently. The way we do with everything at this hour. The story says, while Rome burned, the emperor performed. Made music of it. Watched the fire, like theater, and sang about the fall of Troy, while his own capital did its Troy impression below. Here is exactly what the sources hold, no more, no less. Tacitus, closest to events, writes that a rumor went around. His word, rumor, that at the very time the city burned, Nero mounted his private stage and sang of the destruction of Troy, comparing the present disaster to the ancient one. Tacitus does not say, it happened. He says, it was said, and he files it where he found it, in the mouth of the crowd. Suetonius, writing 60 years after the embers, no longer bothers with the crowd. In his telling, the emperor watched from the tower of Maecenas, exulting, his phrase, in the beauty of the flames, and sang the sack of Ilium in full stage costume. And Cassius Dio, a century and a half out, repeats it harder still, the way stories calcify when everyone who could contradict them is dead. One event, 3 distances, 3 certainties. The nearest witness says rumor. The farthest says fact. Friend, that pattern has a name in every watch station and every newsroom that ever existed, and you already know what it is. And the fiddle. Let's retire the fiddle formally, watchman to watchman, because this channel deals in real nights. Nero did not fiddle while Rome burned, and the proof requires no argument about character. There were no fiddles. Nothing like a violin will exist for some 15 centuries. The instrument in the rumor is the cithara, the big concert lyre, the instrument Nero actually studied, actually toured with, actually won rigged prizes on. The fiddle got into the sentence in English centuries ago and stuck, because fiddling while Rome burns is simply better music as an insult. And the plainer fact underneath: when the fire began, the man was 30 miles away by the sea. Whatever he did in the days after, whatever a bored genius of self-display may or may not have done on some private terrace, between relief decrees, the picture the whole world carries, the mad king serenading the flames that he ordered, is a painting, friend. Painted by his enemies, varnished by time, and hung in the one gallery nothing ever leaves. The story everyone already knows. Why did it stick? Because it rhymed with the man. He was capable of performing at a funeral. Everyone had seen the smaller versions. Slander only sticks to a surface that grips, and Nero's surface gripped. But the watch log and the legend now disagree on the record. And on this wall, the log wins. Rome burned. The emperor's hands held bread and blueprints, as far as any honest source can see. The song is unproven, and the fiddle is impossible. So why, you're wondering, half asleep and fair-minded, did Rome itself believe it? The camps were eating his bread in his gardens. Gratitude should have drowned the rumor in a week. Here's the thing the watch has learned about cities, friend. Gratitude is quiet, and suspicion is loud, and they don't weigh the same in the dark. The people in the camps did thank him. There's every sign the crowds stayed his crowds. But Rome had an educated class that had watched this emperor for a decade, with their teeth on edge. The performances, the murdered rivals, the mother dead on his order 5 years back. A court that confused itself with a theater troupe. Those men needed no evidence to believe the worst, only an opening. And the fire gave them the widest opening of the century. A disaster with no author. A crime, if it was one, with no witness. Nature abhors a vacuum, but Roman politics abhorred it harder. And one more log entry belongs here, because it feeds everything in the watches ahead. The whisper that the firefighters were seen not fighting, that men with torches claimed authority, that the demolition crews knocked down houses that weren't in the path. Some of that is what fire break work looks like to a terrified householder. Friend, I told you the method so you'd recognize its shadow. Some of it, nobody can now unsay. Hold the city there, fed, sheltered, and whispering. The fire has one more move to make, and it's the cruelest one. because it's the move that turns whisper into verdict. Fifth night, and the log turns hopeful for the first time. So let's end this watch on the turn. The fire has eaten west to east across the middle city for 5 nights. But every fire outruns its luck eventually. The wind is tiring. The fuel is thinning where the flame reaches districts already half cleared. And at the foot of the Esquiline Hill, on the ground where the gardens and estates open out, the commanders finally have what they've wanted since the first hour: room. The plan. The plan is the old plan. At last, at sufficient scale. Demolition. A break too wide for even this fire to jump. Not a lane's width. A district's. Buildings leveled across a vast open line. The rubble hauled clear, the earth left bare. A fire break like a canal of nothing, dug by 10,000 exhausted arms directly across tomorrow's path of the flame. All night the crews work by the light of the thing they're working against. Hooks, rams, ballistae, walls folding into dust that glows orange as it rises. Somewhere behind the line, the camps sleep, their 5th strange sleep, and the bread ovens on the campus never bank their coals now, and the Emperor's engineers walk the break with lamps, measuring the gap with the flame's light in their faces. 5th watch cry of the fire, friend, and for the first time it has good news in it. The break is cut. The wind is failing. The awake ones stand ready on their bare earth line, sleep toward the morning. The fire meets the empty ground at dawn. It works, friend. 6 days and 6 nights after a lamp or a coal or a hand we'll never identify touched off the shops under the stands, the fire walks up to the foot of the Esquiline, reaches for the next roof, and finds nothing there. Bare ground. Rubble raked clear. A break the width of a district, and beyond it, a line of filthy, hollow-eyed men leaning on hooks, watching the flame do its arithmetic. A fire meeting a true break doesn't die dramatically. That would suit it too well. It stands at the edge and eats what it has and burns lower and lower, sulking backward through its own black kingdom, and somewhere in the 6th day, what stands over the middle of Rome stops being flame and becomes only heat and smoke. 100,000 embers settling into their long red argument with the rain that will eventually come. The stop makes no sound. That's the thing nobody expects. The loudest week in the city's memory ends with an absence. No roar, no bells, just wind over char, and men sitting down exactly where they stand, and a silence so large and strange that people come out of the camps to listen to it. On the watch, we log victories honestly, even when they arrive 6 days late and cost the middle of the world. The break held. The method won. Write it, and then put the pen down a moment, because nobody on that bare earth line is cheering, friend. They're looking back at what's behind them. What the fire hands back on the 7th morning deserves one slow look, and we'll take it together and keep breathing. From the Esquiline's shoulder, you can see the path of it, west to the valley where we started. And the word for what you see isn't ruin, friend. Ruins are vertical. This is a lowering. Whole districts taken down to knee height. A plain of gray and black, where streets used to be walls of shadow and noise. And the strange survivors in it. A stone arch alone, a chimney of brick, one umbrella pine at a courtyard center, scorched on its south side. Alive. The rubble holds its heat for days. Walk the edges and you feel it through your boot soles, the ground breathing warmth up at you, and here and there a seam of coals opens an orange eye when the wind passes. The demolition crews keep their rounds, hooks in hand, putting out the ground itself, and through it, already, first thing, before the ash is cool enough to make sense, people, picking lanes they can't recognize by landmarks they knew blind, standing where a doorway was, working it out from the neighbor's stub of wall, from the public fountain's basin, from the slope of the ground, not weeping, mostly, doing what you do, what humans always do, the accounting stare, and then the crouch, and then one tile turned over, and under it, sometimes, the iron key that no longer opens anything. Kept anyway, friend. Hold those two words. The whole rebuilding is folded up inside them. And then, with the city mid-exhale, it happens again. The record is blunt. The fire broke out a second time. New flames, days after the stop, rising not from the smoldering middle but from fresh districts out toward the northeast, in the open properties along the Via Aemilia's line. And Tacitus writes down whose properties, because all Rome said the name in one breath: the estates of Tigellinus. You need to know the name the way Rome knew it. Aphonius Tigellinus, prefect of the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's own soldiers inside the city. The enforcer, the companion of the emperor's worst hours, and the manager of his ugliest business. The man half the Senate feared above the emperor himself, because Nero had moods and Tigellinus had lists. So run the sentence the way the city ran it. Over the water jars and the bread lines, the fire we finally killed has come back to life, and it chose, of all the ground in Rome, the gardens of the emperor's own dog. Understand, friend, on the log side of things, fires do relight. After a week like that one, the air itself is a wick. One ember in a hayloft on a big estate needs no conspiracy. there is a boring explanation. And most true explanations are boring, and the watch owes the boring one its full weight. But nobody rebuilding a burned kitchen wants the boring explanation. And the second fire hands the city something the first one never quite did: an address. The second burn writes its own strange ledger, and Tacitus keeps it exactly: fewer deaths, wider wreck of the beautiful. Round 2 rises in the open quarters, the estates and pleasure districts, where nobody sleeps 5 floors up over a bakery. People simply walk away from it. So the human toll runs mercifully thin, and the flame spends itself instead on architecture, on the porticos and shrines, the public grace of the city, the marble Rome this time rather than the timber one. And politically, friend, that ledger reads like an indictment written by the fire itself. The first burn took the poor's whole world. The second took ornaments while sparing lives. And between them a shape emerges that the angry mind finds irresistible, as if the thing were curated, as if someone wanted ground cleared and got it, and the second helping cleared some more, conveniently outward from the very quarter where a new palace might want elbow room. I give you that reasoning at full strength because Rome heard it at full strength, in the bread lines and the Senate's porches, and the emperor's men answered it, and the answer was true. Estates burn as easily as slums. The prefect lost a fortune. Accident wears every costume. Both stories fit the same facts, friend. That's the trap this city is standing in as the second fire dies. The evidence has burned, and only the shapes are left, and each Roman picks the shape that matches the Rome already in his head. The watch picks neither. The watch says, uncertain, and keeps walking. The second fire dies the way the first one did, of open ground and thinning fuel, and crews who now know the whole grammar of the enemy. And when it's done, the counting Rome does, gives this whole event its famous shape. 6 days and 7 nights, the histories will say, for the great burn. The run from the circus shops to the Esquiline break, then the after fire on top, the Aemilian relapse, adding its days and its acreage to the bill. Call the whole affair a week and some, in high summer, in the largest city the world had ever assembled. I want to give you the scale honestly, and honesty here means resisting round numbers. Nobody measured the burned acres. Nobody could. What the record left instead is one precise, chilling instrument, and Rome itself built it: the region count. Augustus, 2 generations back, had divided the city into 14 administrative regions, 14 slices of the world's capital, each with its magistrates, its fountains, its watch cohort responsibilities. Everyone knew their region the way you know your neighborhood's name. After the fires, Rome went down the list of 14, the way a man pats his pockets after a fall. And the log of that count deserves its own segment. Read slow, because in 6 lines of arithmetic you can hear an entire city finding out what's left of itself. Settle deeper, friend. Numbers next, and they're the kind that hush a room. And then, I promise, the mending begins. The count of the 14 regions. Read once, at watch pace. 4 regions untouched. The fire never crossed into them. The far quarters, across the river and out past the wind's reach, where the only smoke all week was their own suppers. In those streets, this whole catastrophe was a red sky, a smell, and a flood of relatives arriving with what they could carry. 3 regions destroyed. Tacitus's phrase is exact. Leveled to the ground. The Circus Valley and the districts of the First Great Run. In those 3 slices of Rome, the count of standing buildings after the week is effectively nothing. Solo, some scorched monuments, ground plan of a world in ash. 1 of every 5 Romans, roughly, had an address in those regions. Friend. Had. And 7 regions, half the city by count, left in the state the historian describes as a few shattered, half-burnt relics of houses. The fire went through and took most things, and left teeth. A wall here, a ground floor there, salvage and hazard knotted together. Whole streets that are neither city nor absence. 4 whole. 3 erased. 7 maimed. That's the audit of the world's capital in the summer of '64. And I'll let it stand without one word of decoration. Because it doesn't need any, and it wouldn't survive any. The city heard its own count the way you'd expect, friend. Quietly. Counts like that always land quietly. And then, being Rome, it did the next thing. It asked what the bricks cost. But before the bricks, the entry the log can't write, and I owe it to you to say why. Nobody knows how many people died in the Great Fire of Rome. No source gives a number. Not Tacitus, who gives us grain prices. Not Suetonius, who counts Nero's encores. Nobody. The greatest city on earth burned for a week. And antiquity, which counted everything, left the human total blank. Some of that blank is administration. The rolls burned with the neighborhoods that kept them. And absence is hard to prove in a city of renters, migrants, and slaves. Some of it is ancient habit. There's no triumph in counting your own. And some of it, friend, I think, is just the size of the thing refusing to fit through the door of a sentence. So here is how the watch handles a blank where a number should be. We log the blank itself. Write, toll unknown. Write it clearly, so no later hand is tempted to invent. And then, because a blank is not the same as nothing, we do what watchmen on walls have always done at the shift's turn for the ones who didn't finish it. Stand a moment. Name no names, because we have none. The fire took the names too. Just a moment, at watch pace, for the Romans of the 3 erased regions and the 7 maimed ones, who were people exactly as real as you under your blanket right now. There. It's logged where it can't be lost. The mending can start now. And it starts fast. Because this is the part of the story where being Rome begins to pay. Within days of the second fire dying, at the edges of the camps, the first stalls are trading. A vegetable board across two rubble piles. A cobbler working out of a salvage doorway. A barber. Absolutely a barber. Friend, barbers reopen. Before the ash cools in every disaster in history. Because grief doesn't stop hair. The camps on the campus organize themselves the way crowds of the same city always do. Street by street. The neighbors of a burned lane pitching together in Agrippa's porticos, keeping the old address alive as a group of faces while the address itself lies flat. The grain keeps coming upriver. The bread holds at 3 sesterces. The water is guarded. The rations move. And the strange truth settles in that this enormous catastrophe is being administered, fed, watched over, held by the same state whose name is nightly whispered as the arsonist. Both things, friend. Same week. Same man's signature on both. Salvage crews begin the great sorting. Burnt timber in one river of carts, reusable stone in another. And the surveyors appear, the men with stakes and cord, walking the flattened regions and squinting down lines that don't exist yet, and the sight of them ripples through the camps faster than any decree could, because everyone knows what a surveyor is, a promise with a measuring rod. Rome is going to be rebuilt. Nobody doubted it exactly, but now they can watch it be true. The watch cry for this turning of the night, then, and it has 2 voices in it, because the city has 2 weathers now, and a watchman reports them both. Overhead, the first weather, recovery. The camps fed, the stalls returning, the surveyor's stakes going in, the second fire dead and the first one cold, the great mending gathering itself like a tide deciding to turn. If that were the whole sky, friend, we'd run for the dawn from here. But underneath, the second weather, the whisper hasn't died with the flames. It's fed on them. An address on the relapse. A palace rumored for the cleared ground. A singing emperor painted on the smoke by 10,000 angry suppers. The city is starting to want what burned cities always come to want, which isn't bread. They have bread, and isn't shelter. They have that too. It's an answer. A name. Somebody this happened because of, and a very old, very cold piece of political arithmetic is being done this week behind certain doors on the unburned hills. If the city insists on being handed a culprit, the only question that matters is whose name goes on the paper. The next watch is the dark one, friend. I won't pretend otherwise. We'll walk it the way we walk everything. Slowly, honestly, and out the other side. And the fire code and the wide, bright streets are waiting for us beyond it. Sleep if you're going to. The watch holds either way. It always has. When a Roman city suffers past understanding, its first instinct isn't investigation, friend. It's repair, and not only of walls, repair of the peace between the city and its gods. So the months after the fire fill with the old machinery of appeasement, and Tacitus lists it like the careful clerk he is. The Sibylline books are consulted, the ancient oracles kept under guard on the Capitoline's replacement shelves, opened only when the state itself feels cracked. On their instruction, prayers go to Vulcan, first and obviously, the fire god, the smith, the one who must be reconciled, then to Ceres and Proserpina, the grain mother and her daughter of the dark half of the year, because a burned city fears hunger the way a burned hand fears heat, and the married women of Rome perform their own rites to Juno, protector of the city's households, with processions and offerings and seawater sprinkled on her image, the whole solemn choreography of a people formally apologizing to the universe. Watch it without smirking, friend. We don't smirk on this wall. A ritual is a city talking to itself about what it values, and this one says, we know something is broken above the roofline, and we are trying, in the grammar we have, to mend it. The temples fill. The smoke this time is incense. It's the gentlest scene this whole story owns. It doesn't work. Tacitus writes the failure in one of the coldest sentences he ever cut, and a watchman recognizes the shape of it at once. Neither human effort, he says, nor the emperor's largesse, nor the offerings to the gods, made the sinister belief go away, the belief that the fire had been ordered. Read the list again, friend, because it's a complete inventory of everything a state can do. Relief, given, and generously. We logged the open gardens and the 3 sesterce bread ourselves. Rebuilding, underway, faster than anyone dared hope, wider and safer and paid for with imperial money. Religion, performed to the letter, every book consulted, every god addressed by name. And none of it touches the whisper. That's the terrible discovery of this season, the one governments keep remaking every few centuries. Generosity cannot buy back trust once a story has taken root. The story had an address, remember. It had a relapsed fire on the prefect's estates, a rumor of a song, and cleared land already being measured for a palace. Against that, bread is just bread. The young emperor, whatever the truth of his hands, can feel the shape of the thing tightening around his name, and his court can feel it. And courts, friend, when they feel that, reach for the oldest and worst tool in the drawer. If a story this hungry cannot be starved, someone at some lamplit table reasons, then it must be fed. Fed something. Fed someone. The Watch has read this page before, in other centuries. It never gets easier to turn. The someone chosen was a small congregation of the city's poor, and Rome barely knew them. They were called Christians, followers of a teacher executed in Judea a generation earlier, under the procurator Pontius Pilatus, in the reign of Tiberius. Tacitus notes exactly that much, the way you'd file any provincial matter. In the Rome of 64, they were a handful of communities down among the tenements and the docks, meeting in rooms over shops, drawn heavily from the classes who owned least: laborers, slaves, freedwomen, foreigners. They kept to themselves, which in a crowded city is its own kind of visibility. And rumor, which we've watched work all night, worked on them too. They spoke of love feasts and a kingdom not of this world and a judgment by fire, and rumor, needing no evidence and asking none, turned all of it strange and dark in the retelling. The city's word for them, Tacitus's word even, was a class hated for their practices, and hatred of the misunderstood friend is the cheapest fuel in any city, always stacked, always dry. That's what made the choice work, in the cold accounting of the men who made it. Small enough to be safe to accuse, strange enough to be believable, poor enough that no senator would rise for them, a people already standing outside the circle of the city's sympathy, at the exact hour the city was demanding someone to put outside it forever. The order goes out. Arrests begin. Down in the lanes the fire spared. What was done to them I will log the way the tone of this channel and the dignity of the dead both demand, truthfully, briefly, and without staging. They were tried in form, convicted in droves, and executed publicly in the emperor's own gardens across the river, the same gardens that had sheltered the burned-out families in the week of the fire. The deaths were made cruel and made spectacle, deliberately, as policy. Tacitus records the kinds, and I have read them so that you don't have to. And this episode will not repeat them into the dark you're trying to sleep in. It was a persecution, the first the record clearly names, and it was, by that same record, monstrous. And here, friend, told at watch pace, is what the officials watching from the colonnades did not understand about the evening they had arranged. They had meant it as proof. See, we have found the enemy. The matter is closed. What the crowd actually saw, standing in those gardens, was the city's own poor, ordinary faces, from ordinary lanes, dying elaborately for a crime that no one, deep down, believed they had committed. Rome had come to be shown an answer. It left carrying a question heavier than the one it brought. If this is what the answer looks like, what exactly is being answered for, and by whom? Even the stagecraft failed, especially the stagecraft. Some things cannot be performed, and innocence is one of them. And Rome, of all cities, knew a bad play when it saw one. Tacitus, who did not love them, who calls their faith a mischievous superstition in the same paragraph, watched where the city's heart actually went, and wrote it down. And his sentence is, the reason this watch can end in something other than darkness. There arose, he says, a feeling of compassion, pity, because, in his words, it was not for the public good that they were being destroyed, but to glut one man's cruelty. Hold what that sentence is, friend. A hostile witness, recording sympathy he doesn't share, because honesty required it. The blamed became the pitied, in the very act of the punishment. In front of the whole audience, the punishment was staged for. Rome's conscience, which its rulers had budgeted at zero, turned up and voted. And the practical effect, the one the lamplit table had gambled everything on, simply never arrived. Nobody stopped whispering about the fire. The story did not transfer. Blame, it turns out, is not a debt you can pay with somebody else's suffering. The city took the payment and kept the account open, and the name on the account stayed exactly where it had been. All the cruelty purchased, in the end, was itself. That's the ledger of the season of blame, closed and totaled. Relief could not kill the story. Ritual could not, and atrocity could not, because the only thing that kills a story like that is the truth. And the truth had burned with everything else in the shops under the stands. Breathe, friend. The Dark Watch is nearly walked. One entry more, because the log of this season has a long echo column, and the echo is stranger than the season. The persecution failed in its purpose and succeeded at exactly one thing. It wrote that small congregation into history's permanent record, in Tacitus's own indestructible prose, at the very hour they seemed most erasable. The empire's first official notice of the Christians is the empire tormenting them, and that notice, friend, became a founding memory. The community survived it, regrew, kept the names of that garden evening as its first martyrs, built its self-understanding around the fact that the greatest power on earth had blamed it falsely and failed to end it. And then, the long joke of history. The faith Rome tried to burn out of itself in 64 outlasted the dynasty, outlasted the persecutions that followed, outlasted the old gods whose books had ordered the appeasements, until an emperor of Rome knelt at its altars, and this very city became its capital. I don't preach on this wall. Every sleeper under my lantern is welcome exactly as they are. I log outcomes. And the outcome is, of everything that happened in Rome in the year 64, the thing that reached furthest into the future wasn't the fire, and wasn't the fire code, and certainly wasn't the palace. It was the injustice, and what the injured built out of surviving it. The men at the lamplit table were trying to close a story, friend. They opened the biggest one they ever touched. File that where you file the permanent lessons. So ends the Dark Watch, and I'll close it the way the watch closes every hard night, with the two things that are always true at the bottom of human wreckage. First, the cruelty was real, and we logged it without varnish, because a sleep channel that lies to you about the dark isn't calm. It's just quiet, and you deserve better than quiet. Second, the cruelty was not the last word. The pity was. The compassion of a hard city, recorded by a hard historian, standing at the end of the season like one lamp left burning in a long portico. Rome failed its test that year, and knew it. And the knowing itself, written down, carried forward, is a kind of passing after all. Below us now the city is quiet in its camps and its unburned quarters, tired Tired of grief, tired of whispers, tired the way you're tired, friend, in the joints of the soul. And morning is coming with the sound Rome has been waiting half a year to hear over all of this. Hammers, thousands of them, and saws, and the bawling of oxen hauling clean-cut stone up from the river, and surveyors calling numbers to boys with stakes. The blame season burns out the way the fire did, of exhaustion, leaving its own kind of cleared ground. What gets built on that ground, friend, is the last watch of our night. And it's the good one. It's the one with the wide streets in it. Stay under the blanket. Here comes the city that learned. Now, the good watch, friend, the one this whole night has been walking toward, and it begins with a decision that sounds too dull to be great, and is one of the great decisions of the ancient world. The new Rome will be measured. Not resettled, not patched, measured. The decree goes out, and Tacitus records its terms like a man who knows he's copying something important. The rebuilt districts will be laid out by survey, streets in ordered rows, and the thoroughfares built broad, the crooked kindling lanes of the old timber city, outlawed by width itself. Feel the size of that after the week we've walked. The lanes where the fires rode. We watched it step roof to roof over alleys 4 strides wide. So the city's first answer isn't a wall and isn't a prayer. It's geometry. Pull the buildings apart until flame can't jump the gap. Every widened street is a fire break that never has to be cut at midnight by exhausted men with hooks. A break that just stands there, permanently disguised as room to walk. Down on the flattened regions, the surveyors work outward from their stakes, cord by cord, calling the new lines across ground where the old lines are a memory of ash, and the carts roll in behind them with the future stacked in blocks. Rome has decided to learn, friend. Cities don't always hold the lantern up. The lessons come in fast now, one a segment, each one bought this July at the price you watched. Lesson 2 and Lesson 3 come as a pair, written into the same decree. The buildings themselves get a ceiling, and every one of them gets its own bones. Height first. The insulae, you remember, climbed 5 timber floors and more, each one lighter and drier and further from water than the last, torches stacked on torches. The new law restricts the height of houses. The tenement can no longer grow into its own pyre. Rome, the city that invented the apartment block, becomes the first city to regulate how high one may reach, and the argument between landlords and that law will run for the rest of Roman history. And the law mostly holds. Then the walls. In the old city, buildings leaned on each other, sharing party walls, so that structurally, an entire lane was one long building wearing 20 addresses, and it burned like one. The decree ends it. Every building enclosed by its own proper wall, each house structurally alone, a fire cell sealed at the property line, and in front, facing the new broad streets, colonnades, porticos running along the frontages of the blocks, and the emperor pays for these from his own funds, stone galleries with a double purpose you could put on the vigil's crest, shade for the walker on the bright new streets, and a fighting platform, a ready-made stone terrace from which fire crews can work the face of any building at height. Room between them, a limit above them, bones of their own within them, and a firefighter's balcony out front. The insula, domesticated. Lesson 4 is the one you can still bend down and touch, because it's about what the city would be made of, and the answer came out of the ground Rome stands on. To a set height, the decree runs. The new buildings must be built solid, in stone, with no wooden beams, and not just any stone. Stone from Gabii or from Alba, quarried out of the volcanic country around the city. Tacitus gives the reason in 3 words that end the argument: impervious to fire. The old volcanoes of Latium, south and east of Rome, had spent their violence ages before the first hut went up on the Palatine, and left behind exactly what a burned city needed: sponges of hardened ash, stone born in fire, already burned once by the earth itself, with nothing left in it for a mere city fire to take. Light enough to work and haul, tough enough to bear 5 floors, and calm in flame the way water is calm in rain. So the quarry roads fill, and the river fills, and the ground floors of the new Rome rise fireproof out of the old country's fire, which is the kind of poetry only geology writes. The volcano as the city's insurance policy. Timber doesn't vanish. Upper floors and roofs still want their beams. And Rome will burn again in smaller ways, cities always do. But never again like this July. And part of the reason is standing in the walls, friend. Quarried patience. 100,000 years of it, stacked by the mile. Lesson 5 is water, and with it comes my single favorite detail of the whole rebuilding, the one I'd frame and hang in every watch station on Earth. The old city's water, abundant as it was, had a habit the fire exposed. It wandered, tapped, diverted, siphoned off by private greed along the way, so that when the bucket chains formed in the first hour, some fountains ran thin, exactly where the flame ran fat. The decree answers with wardens, appointed officers whose entire office is the keeping of the supply, so the water arrives fuller and arrives everywhere, and, the law adds, every householder must keep the means of fighting fire ready in his open court. The bucket, made a legal fixture of every home. 58 years after Augustus bought the city its first buckets, The bucket becomes as much a part of a Roman address as the door. And the detail for the frame, the rubble. The wreckage of the old city had to go somewhere, and the grain, you remember, was coming up the Tiber in convoys to feed the camps. So, the decree joins the two problems at the waterline. The ships that carry the corn up to Rome shall carry the rubble down and lay it in the marshes at Ostia. Bread upstream, ash downstream. The same hulls, no empty mile on the river. The old city leaves in the wake of the loaves that feed its people, while the new one rises. Administration, friend, at the level of poetry. It's not common. Log it when you see it. Did Rome love its bright new city? Friend, this is Rome. Rome has never once loved anything without filing a complaint, and Tacitus preserves the grumbling right alongside the decree. There were those, he records, who held that the old city had been healthier. The narrow lanes and the high roofs, they argued, kept out the sun. The new broad streets, open to the sky, unsheltered by any height, glowed with a fiercer heat, and the summer walker cooked on the pavement. His safety was made of. And I want you to hear that complaint fondly, the way I do, because of what it means. The recovery had reached the stage where people could afford to be annoyed. Nobody grumbles about sun glare while the ash is warm. Complaint is a luxury good, friend. Its return to the market is the surest sign a city has decided it will live. A Roman stepped out of his fireproof ground floor onto his surveyed street under his subsidized portico, squinted and said, "It's too bright. They've ruined it." And that sentence, that eternal, ungrateful, magnificent sentence, is the sound of a civilization out of danger. They grumbled and moved into the portico's shade, which had been provided for exactly that. And the water ran fuller, and the buckets hung by law in every court. And old men began telling children how much more interesting the city had been when it could kill you. The mending, in other words, held. One building remains, friend. You know the one. We have to talk about the palace. On the cleared ground between the Palatine and the Esquiline, where the fire had emptied the heart of the city twice over, the emperor built the thing his name never escaped, the Golden House. Suetonius, who saw its like from close to, writes it up, disbelief still wet on the page. A vestibule tall enough to hold a colossal statue of the emperor himself, 120 feet of him. A triple colonnade running a mile. Inside the grounds, in the middle of a capitol, an artificial lake like a sea, with buildings set around it to represent cities, and tilled fields and vineyards and woods stocked with animals, a countryside forged inside Rome. In the house proper, dining rooms roofed in carved ivory, panels that slid to rain flowers and perfume on the guests, and one great banquet hall, circular, that revolved day and night like the heavens themselves. When it was far enough along to occupy, Suetonius records the only comment the emperor made, and it's perfect, and it buried him. At last, Nero said, "I am beginning to be housed like a human being." He meant it. Friend, that's the terrible part. The artist finally had a room worthy of the art. But say the sentence in a city of camps and half-built lanes, on ground the fire cleared, by the man the whisper had never released, and count what it costs. Rome heard it exactly the way you just did. He even dreamed, Suetonius adds, of renaming the city Neropolis. The city declined to be renamed. Cities usually do. The palace finished what the fire began, not the burning of Rome, the burning of the name, because now every element of the whisper had its monument. Was the fire ordered to clear ground? There stood the ground, cleared, with a mile of colonnade on it. Did he sing while it burned? There stood the private theater of a house, with heaven turning over the dinner table. Every marble acre answered the way the crowd already had, and no bread price could argue with architecture. The Golden House became the accusation, cast in the one material Rome respected. Too much to disbelieve. 4 summers after the fire, it was over. Abandoned by the provinces, the legions, and the Senate, the man who had ruled the world since 17 died by his own hand at 30, almost alone. Suetonius gives him a dying line to match the life. What an artist dies in me. The Watch adds its own entry beneath the famous one. This same man's signature sits on the open gardens, the 3 sesterce bread, the measured streets, the stone that doesn't burn, the water wardens, the buckets in every court, the rescue and the palace, the code and the cruelty, one name across all of it. History mostly kept the song and the fire, because a monster is easier to file than a man who was several things at once. We keep the whole ledger up here, friend. It weighs more, but it's the only honest cargo. And the story isn't done with that palace ground yet. One more turn, the best one. Because the Golden House, friend, had one more owner ahead of it. Everybody. The emperors who steadied Rome after the fall wanted nothing of Nero's name, and the shrewdest of them, Vespasian, looked at the most hated acres in the empire, the private sea in the middle of the capital, and made the single best public relations decision in Roman history. He drained the lake, and in its bed, on the exact ground where one man had kept an ornamental ocean for himself, he raised the largest amphitheater the world had seen. A bowl for 50,000 Romans, thrown open to the city. The message required no inscription. What was taken for one is returned to all. The people's arena, standing in the tyrant's pond. His son Titus opened it in 80 with 100 days of games, and Rome forgave the ground on the spot, the way crowds forgive anything that lets them in free. They called it the Flavian Amphitheater, after the family. But the Colossus, the 120-foot bronze of Nero, still stood beside it, recrowned as the sun god because bronze that size is easier to rename than to move, and the city, with its genius for calling things what they are, began saying, "Meet me by the Colossus." At the Colosseum, the name stuck, friend. It's stuck still. The most famous building on Earth carries, folded inside its name, the last echo of the man whose palace it demolished, and I never once walked past the fact without tipping the cap. History doesn't do justice often. It does irony beautifully. Pull the view back now, all the way to your own century, and let me show you what this one July week left in the permanent record, because it's more than a story. You live inside its consequences, friend. Tonight, every building code on Earth, every law that says how high, how far apart, what materials, where the water must be. That family of ideas has ancestors, and among the oldest is the decree we walked tonight. Streets by measure, heights limited, party walls banned, fireproof stone to a set height, water warded, buckets required. The boring paragraphs that keep your bedroom from joining a neighbor's kitchen fire at 3 in the morning, friend. Rome wrote their great-grandmother in the ash of 64, and the vigiles, the bucket fellows with their siphons and their mats and their patrols, stand at the head of a line that runs unbroken in spirit to every firehouse in your city right now, where somebody is awake this exact minute, so you don't have to be. The trade never changed. Only the trucks. And under modern Rome, the week itself is still physically there. Archaeologists cutting trenches through the city's layered basement keep meeting it. A stratum of red burnt clay and charcoal, the fire of 64 pressed flat by 20 centuries of cities stacked on top, a page of ash bound into the book of the ground. They log it and dig on, and above their heads the traffic of the living city rolls over the whole library. Rome kept the receipt, friend. Rome keeps everything. So come stand with me at the end of it, on the one piece of ground that belongs to both our knights, the Circus Valley, where the shops were, where the first smoke found me. It's a park now, the Circo Massimo, the Romans still call it, the old arena floor lying long and green, the track's shape kept by the shape of the land. On summer evenings, people jog the spine where the turning posts stood and walk dogs across the finish line, and sit on the slope where 250,000 Romans once stood up roaring, and above them on the Palatine the palace's broken brick goes gold at sundown. The same last light it caught the night this story began. Put your palm on the stone, friend. The old wall of the hill is warm long after dark. July heat, banked in travertine, the way it was the night the wind rose, and somewhere under the grass and the 20 centuries, the ash layer lies, quiet, in the dark, holding its weak the way you're holding yours, almost asleep. My old watchman said this valley would stand through whatever the summer brings. He was a wall short of right the summer I've been telling you about. But stretch his sentence 20 centuries, friend, and he wins after all. The fire got the shops, and the wind got the lanes, and the whisper got the emperor, and the summer, in the end, got none of it. The valley's still here, the city still here. You can go and stand in the grass. The Knight's Ledger, then Watchman's Honor. Lamp burning low. A fire began in the shops under the stands, wind-driven, and burned 6 days and 7 nights, and came back once more. And of the 14 regions of the world's capital, it left 4 whole, 3 erased, and 7 maimed. The oldest altars burned, and the hearth of the state, and the books, and account of the dead that no one made, logged as the blank it is, honored anyway. An emperor, 30 miles off, rode toward the burning, opened his gardens, priced bread at 3 sesterces, and never outran a song he probably never sang. The blame season came and shamed everyone it touched except the ones it killed. And out of all of it came the measured streets, and the stone that doesn't burn, and the wardens of the water. The whole patient grammar of cities that plan to grow old, and a grass valley where Rome walks its dogs in the cool of the evening. 20 centuries safe. The fires we watch for are still out there. That's why there's a watch. But not tonight, friend. Tonight the lanes are wide, the buckets are full, the stone is volcanic, and the only thing burning anywhere on this beat is the lamp beside you, banked low and steady. Morning watch soon, and the Swifts will get up off the Palatine, and Rome will do the thing it has done every single dawn since the ash cooled, which is open its shutters and argue about breakfast. The watch is over. Sleep well.